Hi, my name is Representative Al Baldessaro, and I'm one of the co-hosts on Who's Looking Out for You. I have a special co-host guest today. Janine, once again, was tied up in Merrimack, Representative Nada, and my good friend, Representative Tom Dolan, who also town council. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Al. Good to see you.
You know, for the people that know you as a town council don't realize how have you made a mark up at the State House. I mean, here we are, a freshman, Tom Dolan, and all of a sudden the ranking member resigned, and next thing you know, now let me explain, the ranking member is the #1 guy for the Republicans in the committee. He's the one that sets up, holds the caucuses, talks to everyone about so we're on the same sheet of music, breaks down the bills so people understand, and makes sure he has people to write the reports for them. And he's done a super job. So for Tom, for a freshman to be a ranking member, that's unbelievable.
Thanks, Al. This committee I'm on is the Municipal and County Government Committee. And I think with Al's help and the others' leadership in Concord, they looked at my resume and saw that I had been serving in a municipal government for a couple of decades now and thought that I could bring that experience to the State House and that particular committee, and it's worked out quite well.
That's awesome, and you know, you've got a lot to offer. It'll make a big difference here on the team on making sure we protect the New Hampshire advantage.
Right.
Tom, we got a special guest today here. Used to live in Mount Vernon, moved to Nashua. He was the Speaker of the House, which I served as a chairman of State and Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs. He cut government almost $900 million, or maybe up, and he says $1 billion, but I don't know. You want
to hear
Mr.
about
Speaker,
my fish stories?
welcome, yeah.
Welcome to
Ryan.
Londonderry,
Yeah,
Bill.
welcome to
Yeah.
Londonderry.
And Tom, congratulations to you. You know, I became speaker in my 3rd term, and in the first 2 terms, they wouldn't let me chair a committee, or I had to break my way in. So,
Well, we were in the minority.
Yeah,
You know?
we were at
Yeah.
that. But I think it shows that the other members have a great deal of respect for you, and congratulations on
Thanks,
that.
Bill.
Well, Bill, let's get right to the point here, okay? What have you been doing with yourself since you didn't run, you were gonna run for US Senate and you stepped back.
Right.
Now what are you doing with yourself?
You know, I'm in the dreaded private sector, and so I've started a software company. We have 8 employees, and you know, my background is as a lawyer, but I decided I could run a software company, and it's going. We're making a go of it, and very interesting. I now have 4 patents
Wow.
that I've been able to get the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to agree to. So I've been doing that, and then I've been, like a lot of people, kind of looking at the craziness going on in Concord and nationally, for that matter. It's a real tragedy, and just say, you know, I don't want to have to look at my grandchildren, you know, a decade or 2 from now, and they say, you know, what did you do? What did you help out?
Right.
And so I decided I'm going to step forward. Nashua is not Mount Vernon. You know, Mount Vernon was a town that was, you know, fairly conservative, and so I'm going to have to work for it.
Yeah.
But we have great hopes for Nashua generally, and in my Ward 9 of Nashua.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, you made a big difference. Tom was, of course, on the outside looking in at that time. What made you, what was the reasons, I should say, remember when you made that major cut? What was it, 900 million or $1 billion, 890 million?
You know, the funny thing about budget is state budgets, you never can really tie down exactly
Yeah.
because there's state funds that come in, there's federal funds that come in, there's a budget that you plan for, there's a first closing of the budget, then there's a reconciliation in September. So we're about 900 million in savings. Actually, a little bit more of that, because we decided not only do we have to right-size government for revenues, we have to get the economy going. So we reduced 12 other taxes to try to get
yeah.
it going. So, you know, it was overall at least 900 million. State-funded portion of the budget, we cut 18.9% out of it. So almost $1 out of 5 we reduced. And we didn't do it, as you know, you were an invaluable part of the process. We didn't do it just because we figured out, you know, small government's better, let's make government small. There's some legitimacy to that argument, but we did it because the Democrat controlled House and Senate, a couple of terms before, had overspent to the degree that revenues that were coming in were going to be that much under what the steady state spending was. And, you know, it was, you remember the process. They thought, well, we've teed up another sales tax for you guys. Or
they thought you were
income
crazy.
tax.
They thought they had us, you know, for a sales tax. That's right.
And so that kind of process of proving them wrong there was somewhat gratifying. It was also gratifying when they said, you know, you're cutting so much that grandma's going to be found thawing out in a snowbank after winter's over, that, you know, grandma was okay.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
the
you
state
ain't
was
kidding.
okay.
Now, you know, Tom Dolan here has done that a few times here in the town, where they kept the town tax either, you know, steady, or they dropped it a little bit, and of course the school pushed it up. I mean, how many budgets have you been involved with?
It's probably been 20
Yeah.
annual budgets
Yeah.
in a row.
And the toughest part of it are the school portion of it,
Right.
because, you know, I know in Mount Vernon and Boston, I used to rep those two towns, a town portion of the budget, which runs everything but the schools, was fairly reasonable. They would do a real good job, you know, 15% of the overall spending, and they would watch it closely. And then the school part of the budget would just balloon. And it was hard to control. I was on the school board in Mount Vernon. We managed to cut the budget 0.5%
Wow.
one year, and they came roaring back, and it was a double-digit increase the next year. We had a town meeting,
Right.
or a district meeting for our school budget to approve it, and they just packed it in there.
Yeah, well, you know, Londonderry here puts out a lot of quality kids. I mean, I can vouch. I've had 5 kids go to the Londonderry school system, and 4 out of the 5 have all got bachelors. 2 of them, you know, they got masters, and one went into the Marine Corps.
Well, what concerns me is the mission to achieve that result, which should be the mission of our schools, is now been perverted to a greater or lesser degree, as we've seen, into one where it's to propagandize our kids, to convert them into, quite frankly, the National Education Association, or what it means to be a good citizen, which is to believe in socialism,
Right.
and to believe that America is a negative on the world. That's the 1619 project that you've probably heard about, that
Yep.
America didn't begin with our founding fathers, the framers. It began with slavery, which is so perverted, so awful. And it's not even true. 1619, the African Americans that came in as indentured servants. And
that's right.
just like my ancestors, the Irish, they could work their way out
Right,
of that.
the Italians the
indenture.
same way, the
Yeah.
Irish.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
I served on a special commission this past fall about what's going on wrong with our kids in school, in our public schools. About they don't seem to get much education in civics
Right.
and learning how our government works.
Right.
And so we studied that and found that some real holes in our curriculum across the state. So there's a lot of recommendations coming back, and again, they're only recommendations, but how to shore that up
Sure.
and get our kids
Sure.
better educated as to what, I mean, just the 3 branches of government. A lot of our kids, you ask them who the vice president is, they have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we chuckled and quite frankly made fun of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when she was asked or referenced the 3 levels of government. She said the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And we said, you know, this is a woman who graduated from Boston University with a degree in economics. How could that be? And so we chuckle about it. I think she's a reasonable, intelligent person. She's not been given the opportunity to learn exactly what you were talking about, that there is not only a structure that has to be understood, it has to be understood in the context of world history, which
Right.
is, this is almost a miracle. What happened in 1776 was almost a miracle, and set aspirations for improvement of mankind.
You know, the 4th graders that come up to the State House there when we were having the tours, I've always asked different classes from around the state, have you ever read the New Hampshire Constitution? They don't even know we have a New Hampshire Constitution. They're taught some things about the U.S. Constitution
Right.
before they come up to the House, but they have no clue
Right.
the Hampshire Constitution or what it means under states' rights under Article 10.
It's
You
an,
know,
it's
a
an older
shame.
constitution than
Yeah.
the US
So
Constitution.
what happened with that commission that you were on?
Well, we made some recommendations. The time period kind of was finite, so we've kind of had to finish.
Was
We-
it a state legislative?
Yes, oh yes,
study?
yep. It
Mhm.
was made up of a combination of state reps and senators.
Mhm.
And we made recommendations back to the governor and back into the education hierarchy of what we ought to do. And I mean, some school districts have virtually no civics instruction, and some have a little bit, but its thoroughness is suspect.
Right,
Right.
yeah. You know, that the kids are our future. I mean, I'm a grandfather, a grandfather, 12 grandkids. You know what I mean? And I want nothing but the best. That's why I do this, to fight for kids and, other stuff for the future.
Right.
I mean, where are we going? We lose the presidency, we lose the House. What's going to happen? We lose the governor? to the
Based,
state?
based upon what we see now, I think we're being given an opportunity to really think this issue anew. We have a teachers' union in New Hampshire that is basically saying, we will tell our members not to go back to work in September unless you meet our demands. Like probably most people, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at those demands. They
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
very little to do with
With the
education of kids. It
Right.
has everything to do with careerism. There was a report last week that was given to the British government by a commission they appointed. It wasn't Breitbart News, it wasn't Politico, it didn't have an agenda. And they asked the question, has there ever been an instance during this pandemic when a teacher has been infected by a child in K through 12?
Right.
And they said, we've done a survey, we've looked hard, we haven't found one instance in the whole world where that is happening. Yet our teachers union is saying, not only will we not go back to work because we're afraid of our kids, but we want you to continue to pay us as if we're working. You know what we need to do in the state level? You know what I'm going to try to do if we get up there? We've got to take that state mandate, that's state funding that's mandated by the Claremont decision, and we have to make sure that travels with the student.
Right.
And if the best education's being offered is by a public school, and it sounds like Londonderry did a real good
Well,
job.
do you see what the governor did just recently with the CARES Act? That money that he got in, he put aside $1.something million that are going to go to kids for choice.
Right.
That want to go to religious school, private schools, charter schools.
And so we ought to take that whole month that comes in each year that we just sort of divvy up among the schools and say that's the students' money, that's the family's
right.
money. 'Cause clearly there has to be some standards on how to make sure they're spending it on education. But if they want to send it to take their kid and go to a private school, parochial school, if they want to go to a charter school, if they want to go to the public school, then the money ought to go.
So the
Right.
money follows the child.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a no-brainer.
I remember when in the middle of my speakership after the first session, we finished up and I was so agitated, I decided I was supposed to go home, go to sleep, and then drive out to Arkansas to see my daughter. I just jumped in the car and drove out to Arkansas to see my daughter. And so I was just traveling along, and by that next morning I was in Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw signs on the highway, and it was signs put up by public schools talking about how good they were because they were in competition.
Right,
A student in Indiana,
Yeah.
if there was an opening in the school, could go to that public school next town over, take their funds, and so that competition was good. It was helping
Right.
Indiana kids.
And we know one size doesn't fit all. I mean, I'm like I said, a father. I had 5 kids. I have 7 kids. My wife has 4. And 5 have gone to the school system here. But I know one size does not fit all. I mean, you've been involved. Your wife's a teacher.
Right.
One thing I got to say is, with my kids, I've never had one of my kids come home and tell me a teacher pushed them or talk to them about Democrats or vote this way or vote that way. I've got to admit it. When we're in California, forget about it.
Right. I think also one of the things that that we've got to grapple with is the special needs issues.
Yeah.
They drive school budgets nutty with the costs of special needs, and it's something that I think we have to recognize and have better ways to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, you're absolutely right. What we've done, and I really came across this back in 2001 when I first joined the school board. I knew it existed sort of academically as an issue, but I sat on a school board and I realized that they put the education of children in competition to the medical care and the special needs of other children. You know, we would sit there on the Mount Vernon school board and we'd be sitting going, should we spend $15,000 for a chain link fence around the playground? Maybe not this year, next year. And then we'd have a director of special needs come in and say, well, we just had an out-of-district placement, it's going to cost $200,000, and you have no choice but to pay it.
Right.
And that denies us the ability to really respond to kids, what can be really wonderful about. Every kid has something that's really wonderful about them. They can be academically strong in math or history or art, or they can have an understanding of physical objects. We lose the opportunity to respond to that.
Right. I think that's why it's so important to get our kids back to school when the school year opens.
Yeah.
That there are so many needs beyond just the book learning, so many needs that are fulfilled
Right.
Right.
when those kids are in school, that by keeping them out of school I think is incredibly damaging to them for the long term.
Am I overly cynical in believing that the response nationally, I don't think so much in this state. I think Governor Sununu is trying to be very reasonable in the orders he's putting in place, but nationally is to basically put dislocations into the economy, to make it seem worse than it is, in order to argue against the re-election of President Trump.
Well, that's what it is. They're
Right.
determined to make it look bad, the fear factor, everything else. But you know something, if you look at like right now with the kids not in school, why did the governor have to put a few $1 million in domestic violence and also in child programs because of issues that were going on that have gone up in the state?
It's hard times for people. They're losing their jobs. You know, I have a small business, and I'm very lucky. My business is essentially conducted on the internet. So if people stay at home, our revenues come in, we can go about getting new customers and everything. There's a bunch of businesses that are entirely retail, customer facing.
Right.
They're dependent on opening a door and admitting people to their premises. Folks who have been working for these restaurants and retail, they are really under stress. And I don't think nationally there's either an appreciation or, quite frankly, caring on the part of the National Democrats about those folks. They're less important than being able to say, we have arguments against Trump.
Yeah.
I saw an interesting statistic the other day that said that in the United States, the number of young school-age children that will die from COVID-19 is much less than the number that are going to die from stray gunshot wounds
Yeah. Wow.
in cities like Chicago and
Detroit,
New York
yeah.
and Detroit.
In instant stray, we're not talking about kids being targeted and the tragedies of family violence. We're just talking about kids out and about and away. You know, it's funny. I've been waiting for these statistics to come out because I came across a study once, and at one point, the city of New York closed all its school buildings during the summer because of the asbestos scare. So they were going to just close them all up. You know, New York doesn't do anything unless it's hundreds of millions of dollars. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars during the asbestos abatement. And somebody came up with a study that demonstrated that if you hadn't closed the school, there was a statistical probability that in the lifetime of all those kids that were going, that 1 of 2 before they became the age of 70 would have got cancer.
Wow.
As it turned out, about 10 kids died who would have been in school in auto accidents, being run over as pedestrians and everything. It was actually more dangerous for them.
I mean, with everything being shut down, the level of anxiety and depression and those types of problems have skyrocketed. I mean, we've dehumanized our population to some degree. And it's a very sad situation. We're looking to help protect the population by all the stay-at-home orders and so forth, closing the parks, no recreation, no dating, no touching.
Right.
But we failed, I think, to understand the other issues that come along with that,
Right.
what it does to our society, and I think I mean, there's some benefit from doing what we have been doing, but we also have to understand there are consequences.
Yeah, and we have to take the lessons that we've learned. I really did agree back when this first started that we have to make sure there's not going to be a rush of people into the hospitals. Let's try
Right.
to keep them from being overwhelmed. It became clear within 2 or 3 weeks either that had been achieved or it's not going to happen. And after that, we didn't take what we knew, which is this is a disease of old people and infirm
Right.
people.
Yep.
Young adults, young children are not I guess the medical term is a vector. They're not a vector for this disease.
Right.
They don't infect others, they don't get infected. Sure, there's anecdotal cases, but and at that point, what we should have done is take on money and help out these long-term care facilities.
As we had this major goal, one of the early ones, as you mentioned, was not to overwhelm our hospitals.
Right.
Right.
And we got to a point very quickly where the hospitals were having massive layoffs
Yes.
because they had no business.
They shut off all the operations. I was my operation on my throat. I have 2 polyps. I'm having the operation August 4th. I was supposed to have it April 3rd, and they canceled it.
Well, and so there's that, and I've read that in some areas of the country, breast cancer testing is
Yeah.
down 90%.
Right.
That is condemning women to death.
Right. People
Because-
are avoiding their screening tests.
Right. Or it's difficult to schedule.
You
You
know,
know, I'm trying to schedule similar to you. I have a problem with my eye stretching back 50 years when I took a hockey puck in it. It's never been the same. And so there's a little operation I have to do. It's difficult to find the scheduling to do it.
You ain't kidding. You know, just to give you an idea, I pulled the report this morning from the state on coronavirus. What most people don't realize, the Rockingham County, we have about 304,000 people in Rockingham County. And what we have for cases is, let me see, Rockingham County, 1,607, cases out of 304,000 people. Now, here in Londonderry, I think we're down to about 5 or 6, somewhere around there. So the fear factor with the news is really out of control. I mean, if it's, people go to the Facebook or even go to the state COVID, you can get an idea. They are scaring the hell out of people, the news, when there's really no reason for it. So, well, we got to get a handle on that because the reports, the actual numbers don't show it.
And you know, I talk to often Democrats or some younger people, and they say, well, Trump caused this. Our per capita death rate as a result of the COVID-19 flu is less in the United States than it is in every country in the European Union except Germany. We've had, by a factor, sometimes by a multiple, it's less. And if you take out the Democrat-run states of Illinois and New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, the ones where there's been some real incident, take those out, we're among the best in the world.
Right.
And
yeah.
so it's not as if there hasn't been an appropriate response, but we've got to have people go back to work.
You know, when they're talking about they're waiting for a vaccine, well, we have a flu vaccine and many people are still dying.
Right. Less than half of our population take the flu vaccine.
Right, I don't take it. I don't. I got sick years ago from it. The VA always asked me, you want the flu? I'm not taking it. I was a guinea pig for 22 years in the Marine Corps. I'm still sick from the medication they gave me for the chemicals. You know, and a lot of veterans come home with Desert Storm Syndrome stuff from
Right.
those chemicals that were never approved.
So Al, I'm going to reveal what kind of an old guy I am by this comment. When I graduated from high school back in 1969, I didn't know it at the time. Apparently, there's a virulent flu epidemic that was going on. It ended up killing, I think I have the right amount, it ended up killing about 160,000 people based on a population that was about 190 million at this point. We have a population now that's in excess of 300 million. If we had the same death rate applied to this population, we'd be well into the 200,000. We didn't know it at the time. We went about our business. We understood that flu was a phenomenon of wintertime, and so we washed our hands and we did all we could. But it's not something that anyone ever would have suggested, that we shut down the economy. The last bad polio epidemic was back in 1953, I think. Devastating, particularly to young children. No one ever suggested we should lock everybody up and quarantine everybody.
Right.
In order to prevent that from, it was understood that this happens, you deal with it, you look at what you can do, but you don't lose the ability for people to earn a living and take care of themselves.
We destroyed a lot of businesses here in New Hampshire. Here alone at the clock tower, I heard there was like 2-3 businesses packed up and moved out of there. That one physical fitness company there, Integrity, has been in town for years, and Rocco packed up, and he couldn't afford to open back up.
They say 1 out of 5 restaurants will close forever. As
Yeah.
part of
Yes, yes, and we've lost them in Nashua. We lost a Country Tavern in Nashua, which has been there as long as I've been in New Hampshire, and I've been in New Hampshire now for about 35 years. And there's other restaurants and other businesses on Main Street that are closing up.
My son has 2 Italian restaurants in Florida, and he suffered. He was able to take out and deliveries kept him above water, but he still struggled.
Right.
And plus he invested in a new restaurant, and he couldn't even open that up for a month. He had 70 grand or whatever in the second one in West Palm, and then he finally opened up June 1st. Where you can have 50% in Florida.
Yeah, and that's a tough business
Yeah.
because it's full of costs and it's full of perishable inventory. It's a very tough business.
There's one thing that was near and dear to my heart, Bill. You weren't there, but I'm sure you heard about it. Can anyone explain to me why the Democrats put forward HB 1700, which is dealing with the licensing illegal aliens in the state of New Hampshire? What the reason for that was? Why would we be doing that?
I can suggest, see what
I
Tom
mean,
has to say.
yeah,
They are trying to get some new voters. And so basically, if you can give them a motor vehicle license, they can basically show the motor vehicle license and register to vote.
Right. It's I call it voter harvesting.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm always reminded of the famous remark by Erich Honecker, who was the Chancellor of East Germany, the communist state in East Germany, after one of the riots they had. I think they had like in 1954, I think it was. And somebody caught up with him and said, well, if this is such a socialist paradise, why are you people rioting and leaving and want to get out? And he basically said, well, we got to get new people.
Right, yeah.
we got to get a better population.
Right,
so they're trying to get new voters.
When you go to vote, the only thing you've got to do is show your driver's license.
Yeah.
And you
That's
can
it.
vote.
That's
Yeah.
a photo ID.
Well, you look at California there, where they're saying they had 3 million more, or they had more voters than they had,
People eligible to
right,
vote.
eligible to vote. There was more.
So this past week, the National Platform Committee for the Democratic Party dropped their draft party platform. One of the I read it, so you don't have to.
Right, okay, yeah. Good.
I took the bullet for you. On
You
this
took
one,
it, good man. I didn't read it yet.
And one of the elements of it is a path to citizenship for everyone who they call undocumented, but everyone who's broken into our country, ignored our laws to be here, has basically achieved the status of being an illegal immigrant. They would say that person should be given a pathway to citizenship.
Wow.
Again, the same phenomena. They're
Right.
just basically trying to reinvent the electorate so they can make sure that they win elections.
So that explains why the Democrats care more about the illegals than they do about the Americans.
Right.
You know,
I think back to my mother-in-law, God rest her soul, she's deceased now, but when she immigrated to this country, she came to Ellis Island.
My family too, yeah.
She had to take a test.
Mhm.
She had to be deloused and kept in quarantine for a few days to make sure she wasn't bringing any severe illnesses, and she had to have a sponsor and an address to go to, so she wouldn't go on the public dole.
So we have a wonderful tradition of immigration to this country, and a lot of us, maybe everybody at this table, are second, third generation of their families who have been Americans. There was a difference, though, up until the mid-20th century. The difference was that you could allow immigration, open immigration, relatively open, because people either got a job They contributed or they went home. People don't realize about 2/3 of immigrants that came to the U.S. went home at some point. Either they'd worked for a while, they couldn't find a job here. Now we have a robust welfare state. That's what is attracting it. You can be on welfare in the United States, and believe it or not, the average person on welfare has a home with more square footage than the average person in Europe.
Right.
The immigrants must assimilate.
Yeah.
If they refuse to assimilate or don't want to assimilate, then that's a recipe for disaster. In fact, this is rather severe language. Someone said immigration without assimilation is called invasion. But I think assimilation, learning the language, understanding the culture, learning the government, the civics part of it, how it works, getting registered to vote eventually, getting a job, that's all part of becoming an American.
When did we ever forget that our national motto in Latin is E pluribus unum, what it translates to is among many, one.
Right.
And that is the goal, is that we become one.
Right.
And we're not one because, like in the UK, we all live on the same island. We're not one because in Germany we have some sort of a mythical belief about our ethnic background. We're one because we have a wonderful aspiration of freedom, and then we have common elements.
Right,
We have a
yeah.
language that allows you to be in Arizona and speak to someone in Maine. And we lose that,
Yeah.
and we're going to fall apart.
You ain't kidding. You know, there was another bill, and I'm sure you remember this one, Tom, under the allowing voters to vote by absentee ballot. Now, I can understand the COVID thing. You know, some people are scared. But the thing is, most people thought that this was a mail out, just take the voters list and mail everyone a ballot. That's not what it was. It was a vote that said you had to call in and get a copy, you know, fill out the form to get your absentee ballot sent to you, like you do the military. We thought the governor was going to, veto that bill, which he didn't, HB 1672, because, I mean, people are going to Walmart, people are going to, you know, food, all these food stores, everything else, going shopping, but they can't go to vote because they're scared of COVID. Tell me, am I wrong here? Am I missing something?
No, it's a good question. I mean, I ran into this slightly different but a similar issue. I lost my dad this past spring. His death certificate said
Yeah, a
COVID.
great guy in London.
COVID. It said COVID pneumonia. So, but we weren't allowed because of the restrictions. I mean, you could see lines out in front of Market Basket or in front of Home Depot, but I wasn't allowed to organize a wake for him. Too many people, no more than 8 people. I wasn't allowed to have a funeral. When he was very close to dying, I wasn't allowed to have the clergy to come in to read him his last rites.
How can that be?
I did it myself. I had to get a prayer book and find a last rites prayer, and I did it myself.
Were you able to go in and see him?
Yes.
What about your other family members?
No, just
you?
my wife and I. And it was very, as I look at all these gatherings, and in fact, if you were famous, I'm going to sound a little bitter here, if you were famous and on the TV news, you could have a funeral 4 different times in 4 different
Right.
cities. But we couldn't bring and my dad was a small-time guy, and you know, just not a celebrity or anything. But he went to
He was
every.
well known, your dad in town.
But he went to every single wake and every funeral of every relative and friend he had, because that was the right way to say goodbye to somebody, and we couldn't have that for him.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I
geez,
felt really
Tom.
bad for
I'm
that.
so sorry.
And that's some of the strange restrictions we have.
Right.
You can't have a funeral because you can't get people together in church, but you can get them all in the grocery store or all at the hardware store together.
So when did we ever lose an understanding of what it means to be a granite state, or which is that we all make decisions for ourselves?
Personal responsibility.
And folks can say, you know, I know maybe there's a little bit of risk in going to a wake, but this film meant so much to me.
Right, I
I
mean,
want to be there.
I have a mask, and I go to the store, I wear it,
Me
and there are times where I don't wear it because socially distanced or confident that the situation doesn't require it. That's left up to me to make that decision. In
Yeah.
fact, we're the last state in New England that is
Mm.
like that. Every other state has mandatory mask requirements that
So-
I think it dehumanizes us.
So you two guys are up in the state legislature, and I'm trying to get elected. And so the question comes, I'm sure folks who are watching this saying, okay, what are you going to do? And I think we owe them a response to this. One of the things that's clear to me as I looked at the enabling statute for these orders, both local orders and orders at the state level, is that there has to be much more tight legislative oversight.
Right. Yep.
It's too easy to be the focal point of pressure, such as Chris Sununu is, and succumb to the pressure. I'm not saying that he has or not. I know the governor, and I think a lot of them, and he's been a very good governor. But it's hard to be the focal point of that kind of pressure and not say, okay, that's what you want. It's easier because we know when you're a legislature and
Yeah.
you're getting paid $100 a year, you can say, I'm going to do the right thing.
Right.
And I'll
Right.
explain it to you, and either you agree or don't. It's easier for us to provide some oversight
Oh,
and say,
without a
this
doubt.
goes too far, this goes too
I-
far. Let's focus in on long-term care facilities and taking care of the
Yeah.
elderly.
Well-
Let's not tie down.
Well, that if the Republicans were in charge, then of course we would have had the House back in there.
Right.
Because the governor could not shut us down. We have the right per the
yeah.
law in the Constitution to go in there, and we could actually stopped him
Right.
on some. But the governor was kind of screwed if he didn't do it or if he did do it. Either way, he was going to get
I understand.
attacked.
And that enabling statute was passed back in 2002. It was actually the term before I arrived
Right.
in Concord. And I have to tell you, I went and looked after
I did
this
too.
all came up. I went and looked at the legislative history. And the legislative history was very interesting. There were two of our friends,
Yeah,
Dan
I know
Itza
exactly,
and Kenny Weiler.
The freedom guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the freedom
Right.
guys, and they argued against it, saying, and it was so predictive. They basically said, "You're going to see this happen,"
And they
sure
called
enough,
it.
they called it.
Yeah, they
And-
called it back
And
then.
so, that's great. We've learned some lessons here. Let's take
Right.
those lessons to Concord and
Yeah.
make sure that the voice of the people is heard, and that we don't have one person trying to do its best, but perhaps listening a little bit too much to experts and not to regular people.
But you know what the problem was we had there? Of course, the law says the 21 day, then you got to redo it 21. The problem with the governor had, and I seen the Democrats wanted control of that CARES Act.
Right.
And even one of the laws in here that they try to pass, $50 million, was totally against the federal law. And we told them on the floor it was against the federal law. They didn't care. They passed it anyways. So the governor's going to veto that bill.
Yeah.
That they wanted 50 grand to go somewhere, 25 grand to go to another program. Well, that's not what the money was there for.
Coming up with an argument to Democrats that's against federal law is not the most powerful. These are the folks that burn down courthouses.
Right. But it's a myth. It's a myth,
That's
right?
not like a
Yeah.
major issue in their calculation.
There was a law that came proposed to my committee, municipal committee, about it was a Second Amendment issue to some degree. What the legislation proposed was that no firearm could be discharged within a 900-foot radius of any dwelling.
Oh, they keep on coming up with this.
Yeah,
term.
every year, every 2 years.
And so we did some calculations as well. Now, a 900-foot radius, that's an 1,800-foot diameter. And so that means that's a third of a mile.
Right.
So you can't discharge a weapon within a third of a mile of a dwelling or a commercial building.
Right.
And even the Democrats said, no, that's just goofy.
I mean, if you overlaid that rule across a map of New Hampshire, you'd have to be, standing in the middle of the third Connecticut Lake or something before you can fire off
Yeah.
a firearm.
I mean, so we have to, that's one of the things that I know when I go back into session, then one of the things that I watch for is those issues like that.
Yeah.
I call them Second Amendment issues or red flag issues to some degree, but in some cases, it's just common sense. It's
What
just-
really comes pernicious is they'll take an issue like that, if somebody on the Democrat side really has a desire to get it passed, and
Catherine
they have the
Rogers.
majority, yeah, and they have a majority, they'll slip it into the
Oh,
budget.
without a doubt.
They'll slip, it'd be a
Well,
part
look,
of.
look what they did with the
House
red
bill.
flag bill. They slipped that right in there and passed it, going to the governor. That means somebody there that don't like me, like there's 2 Democrats that keep attacking me in town. Every time I turn around, I mean, they're very vicious, rude. A lot of Democrats are mad at them because of the swears and things they're posting on these sites. But anyways, they could call and report me. Next thing you know, there's no due process. The police come and take my guns out of my house.
Exactly.
If that passes. You know, that's why I'm glad, I hope the governor, he's gonna veto that bill, that red flag.
They have actually a word for that phenomena. It's swatting somebody.
Crazy.
Well, no, but they actually, the Democrats, you talk about this
Is
as
it
a
the
hypothetical.
doxing you're talking about?
No, it's not doxing, it's giving up the address. But what some Democrats will do is they'll get Al's address and they'll call in and saying, there's someone shot dead on the floor at Al's house or something like that. And so you end up having a SWAT team come
Right,
over.
yeah.
And they start off as, this sort of humor. That can be a very dangerous situation.
Yes, oh, sure.
And we haven't seen too much of it in Hampshire and other parts of the country. It's a phenomena.
You know, I've been up there 14 years now. And, you know, I keep hearing from some of the constituents here that, well, you guys got to compromise. The Democrats always say compromise. You know what I mean? I've worked with the Democrats like Catherine Rogers, who's a flaming liberal, but she's a person, we're friends.
Yeah.
So her and I worked on the elderly protection bill, okay, on protecting the elderly from scams. But other Democrat, why are you working with Baldessel? Why? You know what I mean? But this compromise stuff here, how do we compromise on their taxes and how they want to tax everybody left and right? Anything that moves, they want to tax. How do you compromise in something like that?
In some fundamental areas, there's a real philosophical difference. And so you search for commonality. You search for hopefully things, particularly in your area, Tom, in municipal and county, people have to respond to their constituents and they'll say, this isn't working well, or can we do that? Those are areas of compromise because they don't often reflect philosophical differences. When you get into First Amendment or Second Amendment or spending issues, it's often very hard to find common ground.
I remember the Leaky Bucket. Remember the Leaky Bucket?
I made the Leaky Bucket.
Did you ever hear that story? He made the Leaky Bucket when he spoke.
Oh, so they were trying to increase the highway tax, the toll tax.
Right, yes.
Which is basically a percentage of on gasoline sales. And so we're trying to say, you don't have to do it. Just stop taking funds out of the highway fund and putting it to purposes that don't have anything to do with highways. For example, the Attorney General's capital crimes unit is paid out of the highway funds. Now, I think we ought to have a capital grounds, capital
Police
police.
Academy.
Yeah, we ought to have a capital crimes unit. But it has not a lot to do with highways. We actually had the teachers union come in at one point and say, well, teachers go to work on highways. And so
They wanted money out of
they
there.
wanted money out.
Yeah.
So in order to make it clear during the debate, you're not supposed to have props on the House floor, but you can go put anything in the ante room. I took this big bucket like this and then drilled holes
Oh,
of
it's
varying
beautiful.
sizes and then labeled each hole.
Democrats hated you.
Some were like $10 million holes.
Yeah.
And some were like, $40 million
Right.
holes.
He was-
And Dave, was it Dave Campbell, the guy from?
Yeah, Dave, the one that killed the ducks.
Yeah, the one that drove over the ducks.
Yeah, that's right, in Nashville, yeah.
Don't tread on me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
He
remember
basically,
that.
he was the one sponsoring it. He was the senior Democrat on that committee. He was the one sponsoring it. And he just came up, we always got along just famously.
He's a good guy,
Yeah,
too,
we got
I mean,
along
I liked
really
him.
well.
I like
and
his
he said,
policy.
just as the debate started, he said, you got me, I'm losing this one.
let me tell you one that I've taken a real interest in the opioid problem we've had in the state.
You had a great bill, I was shocked at that.
Yeah, I put together a bill that I think is a hole in our whole way we deal with this, and that is we have these turn-in old prescription drugs program. You bring them to the police station, and many towns do it once or twice a year.
Sure.
I know in our town we do it 24/7, every
Yeah.
365.
Yeah.
So
good
we
to
have
get 'em out of the
we have a
house.
receptacle to put it in. So I said, well, what about think about mom or dad. Who does the laundry in the house? It's usually mom, sometimes dad. And they're emptying out the pockets, jeans and stuff in the laundry room. And they come across a Ziploc bag full of something. I don't know what it is.
Marijuana, cocaine, something.
What do they do with it?
Right.
What can they do with it? You can't give it to the police because unless the police are very, very open-minded, the police are going to potentially arrest you for possession or at least maybe put your house under surveillance to see if this is a source of drugs. You can't flush it down the toilet because it's going to go into the environment, into the groundwater.
Right.
You can't throw it out the window. It's going to go on the side of the road and it's going to kill animals or pets or whatever. So what do you do with it?
Right.
And so I said, well, why don't we let people, as we do with prescription drugs, why don't we let them turn it in?
Sure. I
And
mean, anytime something like that's turned in, it would be because somebody came across it who doesn't want it.
Right.
And so it's not like
you
you're
know,
dealing with a criminal.
The Democrats blocked that.
Yeah. But we're doing that in Londonderry, aren't we?
Well, we're doing it, but we're doing it at risk. I
At
guess.
risk, yeah.
Because we don't have the authority
Right,
to
yeah.
do it. But
That was a no-brainer, that bill.
yeah, to
I
me
mean,
it
you
was.
know,
This is not confirmed, but let me tell you that I have heard that one of the reasons why it was blocked by the chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee was because it was so spot on and it's such a good idea. They didn't want it to be sponsored by a Republican.
Right. They
Yeah,
want the
terrible,
Republicans to get the
terrible.
credit.
So we'll try it again, but I think it is a way to help rescue moms and dads. I mean, if they find that in the laundry room, now they're preoccupied with what are we going to do? I mean, we got to take care of my son or my daughter and get them therapy or get them
Yeah.
in counseling or whatever. Not worrying about how do I dispose of this legally.
Right.
We ought to take that off their plate and get it off the street and make sure it's not, it's easy for them to do.
Well, you know,
Yeah,
we're
it is a
fortunate.
spot-on bill.
We're fortunate because we have the sheriff has a business in our town.
Yes.
So if you have any questions on how to dispose of that stuff, if you find your kids, Tom Dolan on the council, or go over and see the sheriff at BP gas station, right next to the Dunkin' Donuts on 102. He'll
Right.
give you an idea or talk to you, maybe dispose of it for them legally.
Right.
Right. But he's running for re-election, Sheriff Maceos.
Chuck's been a great addition to our
Yeah.
county government.
And he's having a fundraiser tonight, which I'll be going there and speaking on his behalf.
No, very good, very good. So you guys are running Londonderry. There's always a primary. in
Oh,
Londonderry.
well, last year was the first time in my 7th term running.
2 years ago.
I did 2 years ago, rather.
Yeah.
I didn't have a primary.
Really?
This year, the last minute, a sharp lady jumped in, which we didn't know who she was. She'd never gone to a GOP meeting and jumped in because we had stuck with 7 candidates so we wouldn't have to spend money.
Right.
But she, joined, and that's the American way, and,
Yeah, well, God bless her.
Right, yeah.
I have a primary too,
And she's a veteran.
it gets us out there. It gets us in front of
Yeah.
voters. It gets us explaining ourselves.
That's right.
It's a good thing. There's some spending of money earlier or more than otherwise would be, but it's a good
And
thing.
of course, I'm under the usual every 2-year attack, you know what I mean? And they're writing articles in the newspaper, which is false. I was never investigated by the Secret Service, and I was never sanctioned by the House.
Right,
The garbage that they're putting out there, they're going after Tom Dolan on another site. They're going after Sharon Carson, of all people, one of our hardest working senators in the state.
is. She is.
They're going after her.
If the Senate flipped, I think she could very well be the Senate president.
Without a doubt, If you take a look at Londonderry, the number 2 and 3 person in the Republican Party up there at the State House is Sherm Packett. I'm number 3. Sherm's the deputy. I'm the Republican floor leader.
Yeah, you guys have a lot
You know
of
what I mean?
participation.
Yeah, we have a
Yeah.
lot. And then we got Betsy Mckinney, who's been a long-time rep. She grew up in this town, been on finance. She's a senior ranking member in different other committees.
Right.
Tom Dolan, a freshman. When you're in leadership, Joel, as you know, you were a speaker. We were able to come to the speaker and push a lot of stuff there to make sure it gets passed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very
So,
important.
I mean, you ready to get back in the game?
I am. I'm trying to do that.
Yeah.
So, we get all the literature. I'm going door to door this weekend. Got a couple of evening events set up tonight, tomorrow night.
Oh, that's awesome.
Going to see, I'm trying to remember, I think it's Tom Cotton, Senator
Yes.
Cotton's going to be in town, and so.
When is that? That's the 30th or so, 31st?
Well, there was two events. He was going to be here, he is still going to be here Friday, and then he was going to stay overnight and leave on Saturday, and there was some sort of event Saturday morning. Turns out, I don't know, some sort of a COVID quarantine thing that he can't stay overnight, but he's going to be here on Friday.
Oh, okay.
And so.
I'm going to miss that.
Yeah, he seems to be a rising star in the
Right,
Senate.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, you know, that's what I do, and I immediately went to my business. One of the things I've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years, as you know, is running a twice-a-month meeting
Yes.
called the Center Right
What a
meeting.
great meeting. You should be.
And-
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's under the sponsorship of the Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist, which is an organization founded because President Reagan asked it to be
Yep.
founded. And we have, you know, recently we have video meetings, but even before that, when
Over 100 and something people on there.
we've had about 150
Yeah.
people, and we're going back to actual meetings on I think the next Wednesday is the 12th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you know we had Tom Cotton the last meeting. We had Tom Cotton on it.
Right.
I managed to talk with him a little bit beforehand and all. He's a great guy. I think we're going to have Newt Gingrich at the next meeting.
Awesome.
And you know, I've had Ted Cruz and everything, but the whole purpose of the meeting is to allow folks from the center-right community to communicate with each other. What are we doing? What are we trying to achieve?
Great meeting.
How can you help us? And we exclude some things, which is we don't want debates going on. If you don't agree with what you're hearing, sign up for the next meeting.
Right, yeah.
And tell us what you think about it. But we don't want to waste our time. We don't want to waste our time with virtue signaling. We all, as center-right people, share certain beliefs about Democratic politicians. We don't have to keep on going over it. You know, just let's talk about how we can get things done. And it's quick-paced. You know, we'll spend about 10 minutes with a keynote speaker, but everybody else is sort of 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
Al always does the Pledge of Allegiance.
I do the pledge there, you know. Normally I'm the side of the guard there when we
Yeah.
have it in the building.
Yeah.
Because I can see everyone there walking in, walking
You know,
out.
speaking of the, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, just the other one last rule is everything's confidential unless you go to someone and say,
Yeah.
can I talk about what you said?
Great.
So it's super.
I-
I
Sorry,
was
Tom.
going to say, speaking of a little advertisement, I think I know locally in Londonderry, we have a great place for veterans to congregate. Our American Legion
Oh,
in
yes,
Londonderry
yeah.
is a very modern facility.
Family oriented place.
And I mean, you want to go have a beer, it's economical. It's a great place to congregate with people of like backgrounds,
Yeah.
other veterans. I would, if you're a veteran and you recently moved to Londonderry, I would go sign up at the American
Right.
Legion and try to expand their membership there.
Who would they see over there, Tom?
They could-
Bob Stewart is the
Bob
commander.
Stewart.
Yeah.
Trish is the the manager there. But there's another thing too. If you're like, I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, because if you're a veteran, we fought to put all the veterans program under one roof in New Hampshire. So we changed the name of it. We have actually, if you do a Google search on New Hampshire Department of Veteran Services. Now the National Guard General is the one that runs this here. So they're all under one roof, one shop stop. If you're having a problem with your benefits, call me, 858-3535. I've been an activist for many years. I got connections through the White House, through the Secretary of Veterans, Department of Veteran Services. I know exactly who to put you through. Okay, so don't think it's the end of the world.
Yeah,
Talk to us.
I can vouch.
Tom's a veteran.
I can vouch for Al. Whether
Yeah.
you're a Republican, a Democrat, or
I
independent,
don't
he'll
care
help
what,
you.
what party you are.
This is not party related.
Well,
Yeah.
and Tom, I can say the same thing. When I was speaker, if we had a veteran come in and he had an issue, you know, certainly as speaker I had the ability to call senators and everything, but the problem is we had 2 Democrat senators, and so I'd call
Right.
Al, who would very often and very quickly get the problem solved.
And I'm fortunate. I'm actually one out of 26 National Veteran Coalition advisors for the president.
Yes.
So I just got to pick up the phone, make a phone call. Somebody's picking up for me,
Right.
to get answers. And I just went through this here probably just with unemployment. If I didn't help 30 people, I'd probably help 40-something here in Londonderry. Why? Because I'm great friends with the commissioner, George Kapadas, and I could email George and say, George, what's going on over there? And, I got this person who didn't get any money. Next thing you know, that night or that next morning, somebody called that person here in Londonderry.
Right.
You know what I mean? So being up there a while,
Right.
you know, makes a difference because you make friends, and then you're able to help your community.
I mean, I'll call that constituent services
Right.
also. I mean, if you got a problem, you let us know.
Yeah.
We're very active trying to help you. I just been working on an issue where somebody installed solar panels in their house, and they get a tax break for that.
Yeah.
But for an abatement really, and they didn't file for the abatement for 3 years.
I didn't either, and I
And-
found out later.
And when they said, well, I want to go back 3 years, and I said, no, state law says you only
Yeah.
can do it 1 year.
Yeah.
Those other 2 years you missed, you know, tough luck. So I said, well, you know, let me take that issue to Concord and see if we can, you know, give the town manager or town administrator an exception that if the local government wants to give him that ability to examine each case and grant an exception, then, you know, we'd have to enable that in the state law. But if you bring it forward, we can help carry the water on that.
It's so important. You have to know what people are experiencing and dealing with government out there and where the rough edges are.
You ain't kidding. You know, here, just give you two. Here at the manufacturer's home, I won't name the place, they came to me with an issue there that they were taking, if they didn't pay their rent on the first there at this manufactured home sites, they would get a late payment. And many of them on Social Security and everything else, and the checks don't come into the 3rd, 6th, and 11th.
Right.
So what did I do? I listened to them. I put a law in. Now it's illegal for you to, if somebody's on Social Security, to charge them a late payment until you got to wait for their checks to come in.
Okay, yeah,
Right.
super.
It depends on I think it depends on your birthday and the spelling of your last
Yes.
name. I just recently turned 65, and my Social Security check comes the 3rd Wednesday of every month.
Yep.
So
if
it's
you
not
were-
the first of the month,
yeah.
it's the 3rd
So
Wednesday.
if you were living there and you didn't pay that rent on the first, because most people are living from pay month to month, and we were able to fix that. But anyways, we're down to about 59 seconds. Bill, if somebody wanted to say hello and talk to you and get some information from you, or if they've got relatives in Nashua, how they get in touch with you?
Get a hold of Al. No, no, I have a website. It's Bill O'Brien, O-B-R-I-N, Bill O'Brien 2020.com. So Bill O'Brien 20. You can send an email to that address, info@BillO'Brien2020.com, bill@BillO'Brien2020.com. You can get a hold of me there. And just like Al, I give out my numbers. So my phone number is 603-620-8710. And if you find yourself over in Nashua and you want to meet some people door to door, get a hold of me.
Tom, real quick, how do they get in touch with you? They already know you.
Right.
Right?
You can contact me at 321-2071, and don't forget to come out and vote in our primary on September 8th.
Taxation is theft. Thank you for watching. Look who's looking out for you. We'll see you next time.